Welcome to the BWI Daily Edition. We are live here on Wednesday. Two of the smartest, most informed minds on Penn State recruiting are going to be answering your questions tonight. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. I'm not one of those two people. Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz, they know more than anybody about Penn State football recruiting other than the coaches themselves. So we're going to get into all of that, talk about the class, break down some interesting parts of it, and give you any up-to-date information we may have at the moment. It's coming up on the BWI Daily Edition. Let's bring in the panel of experts. There they are, Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz. Welcome, guys. Thank you for making time after a very long day and a very long year of recruiting.
I mean, Sean
no arguments there.
Sean was off for half of it, but yeah.
Hey,
really
I was still around, still going to camps, observing, doing every little thing. But yeah, the 4 months off really made this cycle go a lot quicker than usual. So I'll take that. Ryan did a heck of a job, of course, all year round, as he always does, and on signing day as well. So yeah, he did a phenomenal job, and I took time off. It was a win-win.
Well, this is my first recruiting cycle with both of you guys, and I just want to say, for people watching the show who think that this is all about like sitting and watching film and just sitting around talking to people, these guys are some of the most active people that you're going to see on the Penn State football beat. Ryan has gone to multiple locations, including Iowa this year. Fitz at a bunch of camps this summer, like you just talked about. It was at a bunch of
went
camps.
To the last building. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I was being sincere for a second, but no. You guys are the best. You guys put in a lot of work. I want this show to be a celebration. I want to talk about the class. I want to have some fun. And obviously break it down for fans and answer questions here on the show. So if you want to get your question on the air, the best way guaranteed is to give us a donation to the channel on the YouTube show. Our tip jar is open, so if you want to give a super chat, I'll be absolutely able to see it, and then we'll get your question here on air. We'll be discussing large portions of the classes. I don't know that we're going to get to every single player, but we'll do our best. So I want to start, Fitz, I want to start with you. Your kind of overview of this class. What's your big takeaway from the class of 2023?
Deep class, spread wide in terms of positions, covered some things that they kind of missed on in the previous class. Got 3 linebackers, which I think they needed. Still a little light on both lines, so they're going to keep watching into February for possibly an offensive lineman. Still looking at the portal for some other positions. But honestly, just looking all over the place, it's pretty deep in spots where they needed to be deep. Added 2 running backs, which was an absolute necessity when you take a look at how this season played out. Of course, with the quarterbacks, I mean, you want to take one every year. Receivers a little light, offensive line. I love the offensive line class, but you could use another tackle there. So just looking around, I think it's a good compliment to the 2022 class, which I think really set the table, especially with guys that were able to get in and make an impact as true freshmen. So I think they did a good job of filling those needs. I think there's some really high-end players here. I don't think it has the early impact potential of last year, but I mean, that was I don't want to say a once-in-a-lifetime thing, but that was a very special class in terms of Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, of course, and some of those other guys. So I think this class will take a little bit of time to catch up, but it's part of that stacking classes that we always talk about in terms of assembling talent at certain spots and spots that can win you championships.
Ryan, coming over you. What is your takeaway from this group?
So a couple of things I'll add on to what Sean was saying. If you look back at last year's class, right, had a bunch of 5-star players. This class, Javen Williams is a 5-star course by On3. We use the On3 consensus. He just misses out at number 35. So when you don't have those 5-star players, it's hard to crack that top 10. And if you look at the region in general this year, which, yes, Penn State's doing a better job nationally, but they're not getting 5 stars nationally yet. There's only a select group of schools that are doing that. So when you look at just the region, I mean, Nicholas Harbor was a 5-star. I can't think of too many others that were 5 stars outside of Ohio. I mean, I'm talking Mid-Atlantic region. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a good core group in the Mid-Atlantic of solid 4-star guys, right? Guys from 100 to 300 range, and Penn State got the majority of those guys. But if you're going to have a top 10 class and you don't have a lot of 5-stars in your region, you have to land a bunch of top 150 guys. And the Mid-Atlantic region just really doesn't have that like Georgia does, like Florida, like a lot of those schools down south. So that was always going to make this difficult. Now, two other things I would add to this. If I can go back to last year, after last season, there were two positions that I thought a lot of people had concerns about. Offensive line, of course. I think Penn State's offensive line improved a lot this season. But going back to last year, when you start, half these guys committed, back in, were they pretty much committed in February, January? When you look at Birch, of course, was last July. But my point with this is just they saw those needs and they addressed those needs early on. And then linebacker was the other one. Now, linebacker looks a lot better now with Abdul Carter. But again, go back a year ago, go back to just August. We were talking a lot about how, who's going to step up. Obviously, there was talent there, but there weren't talent like this. There weren't Tony Rojas kind of talents, Kavion Keys kind of talents. Of course, Tamir Robinson's a credible talent too. We just have to see how he rebounds from the injury. So I think two positions there that Penn State really hit on that we were all talking about. We'd like Penn State fans would like to see, get some talent in there, and they did. And then, by the way, tight end, which is already a stacked class, but they signed arguably the second best tight end class in the country behind Georgia.
So there's a lot of different ways that we can go, but I want to start with the positive, and I want to start with some of the things we got here in the chat. Of course, we said that today is about you guys talking with Fitz and with Ryan. So Brian starts with the niceties, so he gets first crack. Thanks for great coverage, guys. Very excited to keep Dakari Nelson. Reminds me mix of Tig, Brisker, and Marcus Allen. Wow, that is quite the player. Good ball skills and a big hitter. I like Dakari Nelson. We're going to get to Dakari Nelson. Is he a combination of Tig, Brisker, and Marcus Allen? That seems like a very, very high bar.
Little Ronnie Lott in there, Steve Outwell, all the great safeties in there. Yeah, he's very big, very good. He can move. In terms of I was reading a different question about who are you most surprised that Penn State actually signed. He was the guy that jumps to mind there because from out of region, from Selma, Alabama. It's a long way up here. What would he say? 14 hours on his trip up and back for that drive last year. God bless you if you can make that drive. I mean, that's
with a baby, by the way, with a baby in the car.
Yeah, that's oh boy. But no, I mean, you've got the potential to stick it safe. If you can stick it safety, which I think we talked about this in recent weeks. If you're that big, but you can move at that level, naturally people are going to want to move. You're going to want to move him into that Sam spot. We wanted to move Abdul Carter into that edge spot last year. Talked about Tamir Robinson today, potentially moving to an edge, but they want to see what he can do at middle linebacker. But if you're that big and you can move, that's the Alabama model. I mean, that's why you end up with 250-pound middle linebackers and that can actually run from sideline to sideline. So keep doing that. I'm not saying Dakari Nelson is going to be that, but he has the movement skills of a safety at 6'3", nearly 200 pounds, which is very rare, obviously. And to get that kid, I'll be honest with you, looking at his recruitment, Ole Miss was there at the end. Auburn had him on campus with the old staff, but not so much with the new staff. Given how that guy moves, I'm wondering what the catch is because there's no way that guy should get out of the SEC, and that's a compliment. That's a compliment to Dakari Nelson more so than a demerit on the other guys recruiting him. But that's what I take away from this is that this guy is big, can move. I'm really excited to see him. I'm not convinced he won't eventually be a Sam just because nature is going to take over nutrition programs, strength programs, and things like that. But I'm excited to see somebody that big. And Poindexter is willing to play a safety that big. I mean, he's not just going to cast him off. So we'll see how fast he is when he gets to college. We'll see what those movement skills carry over when he gets in the lifting program. But as exciting as a guy that I'm probably more excited to watch him grow than anybody else in that defensive class.
One thing I've been harping on is I love his man coverage skills. And if you tell me you have a Sam linebacker that used to play corner, has man coverage skills, like you've got, that is a special grouping of skills. You mentioned the next question here. Thanks for the great coverage all year. Quick question from Dave. He says, who are the 22 commits you were most surprised committed and signed with Penn State this cycle for the class of 2023? Ryan, I'm going to throw this one to you. Yeah. Who's your surprise in this class?
Well, just real quick, I want to add something on Dakari. You know who Dakari reminds me of? Anthony Poindexter. big, physical. Honestly, I mean, I didn't watch Dex a lot of the day, but if you watch some of the highlights on you, there are some similarities there. Dex likes big safeties. There are. He's not Dex. He's not going to be a college Hall of Famer. I'm not trying to say that, but I do see it there. So, who most surprised me? I mean, Kavion Keys was surprising just because down the stretch, what did we keep hearing, Sean? Like, I mean, it was we're in it.
Yeah, he wouldn't do it.
Right. It was, he came for the visit, and then it was just like a roller coaster, as James said today. Comes for the visit. It was a couple weeks of, hey, sounds good. Penn State might flip them. And then it just was, we got down to maybe the beginning of December, and it was, not really feeling this one, probably unlikely. And then boom, he decommits. So I think, how many people today brought up Alan Zamitis talking about Kavion Keys? I mean, pretty much everybody I talked to, or Terry brought him up, Andy brought him up, Kenny brought him up as far as Alan Zamitis, and he's the reason that recruitment got over the line. And I believe we heard it from Manny Diaz on the live show today. So massive credit to Alan Zamitis. I mean, he's maybe the sleeper as far as the best recruiter on the staff that no one talks about. So I'll go Kavion Keys there, and then just Carmelo Taylor, because that was one where the staff was at practice. Yeah, I mean, the staff. I was kind of hoping James was going to bring that up today during the live show, or at some point, how funky that commitment was. Just because I think we were all thrown through the loop. We're texting people, and they're like, "What do you mean? Like, we're at practice? Like, I don't know what you're talking about right now." And then, sure enough, they get on the phone with him a few hours later, and it's official. And then he stuck too, because there was a time we were like, "Is this really going to happen? Is there games going on here?" Sure enough, he signs.
Well, last year we watched Andre Roy commit in the same manner with a essentially homemade graphic. Somebody else made him a graphic. Penn State didn't know about it when he put the tweet out, and this was similar to what Carmelo Taylor did. And then you saw what happened at the end with Maryland, Andre Roy, Mike Loxley, all that stuff. So we were just kind of like waiting for the punchline to come out again, and it didn't. So, credit to Carmelo Taylor, but that was just a guy that was sort of off the radar. I mean, he came in for an official visit, so he wasn't that far off the radar. But like, when a commitment goes up, if we don't know about it in advance, we have a really good idea of who it could be. Taylor was just so random. So that was an interesting one. He's one of those guys that, like, I don't want to say you forget he's in the class, but we don't really talk about Carmelo Taylor at all. Just looking at the last couple of podcasts that we've done and things like that. So there are guys in this class that have been forgotten, but at the same time, that's kind of good, because low maintenance is very good. James Franklin talked about Alex Birchmeyer today, how they were basically like, don't waste your time coming to see us because we're locked in. Go see somebody else where it matters. And I think that's a really cool aspect of this cycle, where they got a lot of guys on board early and very low drama down the stretch. And I think that's really cool. And that's a credit to the way they do things, credit to the kids that are signing as well.
One big thing we got to get to quickly, and then update a situation. Then we'll get back to your questions here on the BWI Daily Edition. The recruiting signing show was extravaganza. We're here talking about all that stuff, but just in the distance. Really, it's not even in the distance anymore. It's in the foreground, because we've passed the early signing day, is the Rose Bowl. And if you haven't made your ticket, your arrangements yet, you're here watching this show, you're probably a Penn State super fan. So get to LA the easy way, and at a price you won't find anywhere else, from our friends at Collegiate Athletic Travel. They'll fly you out there for just $8.95 round trip, a price that you can afford. Nonstop via Southwest Airlines charter flight from Harrisburg to the Hollywood Burbank Airport, LA's easy in, easy out airport. Departs December 30th and returns January 3rd. Book now. Only a few seats remaining at this price. It's brought to you by Penn State's long-time bowl travel expert, Collegiate Athletic Travel. For more details, athletictravel.com. You guys have a better sense of having to go to these things and booking tickets and all that stuff than I do. Ryan, you just booked some tickets to get out to LA recently, right?
Well, first off, I did cat the last Rose Bowl. That's how I got out there. And then two, yeah, I paid more than that. So I'll just leave it at that. I was telling Sean when this promotion came through, I was like, wait a minute, I kind of want to change this up here, because I'm flying out of DC too. So we'll leave it at that. But it's a great deal. It really is.
Yeah, the cheapest flight out of Harrisburg right now is $9.15, and that's with a stop in Detroit. So it's a pretty good deal. I've also done the cat flight the first time I went to the Rose Bowl from Los Angeles to Harrisburg. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I enjoy the Detroit airport as the only airport I've ever been to, but if I could avoid it, I would do that. So collegiateathletictravel.com. BWIDailyEdition.com. Okay, so the next thing we have to get to is something I expected we'd have something to talk about at this point, but I don't know. I have not seen anything, so this is a live question to the group. Who wants to field the question about Conrad Hussey, the player who was a part of the class and maybe isn't a part of the class? What's the status with Conrad Hussey? Fitz, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I've been texting some people right up to the start of the show, and it's still an ongoing situation. Conrad Hussey, first off, to answer the last question, to segue into this, I think signing those 3 guys out of the region and possibly a 4th with Conrad Hussey is probably the best recruiting job that they did this cycle. But Hussey's been in the class for a while. Went on vacation, went on official visits to Florida State, to Miami. Both of those schools remain in it. This morning, there were strong indications, and by strong indications, I mean he told the Penn State and the Miami staff he was going to Florida State. That did not happen in terms of paperwork. Of course, you got to sign that stuff, send that stuff, and go with it. He did not do that. I guess he took some time to think about it, and by mid-afternoon, we had gotten wind that he was still open, like he was still having conversations. There's been multiple Zoom calls with the family. Penn State's still in this one. I am shocked, but Penn State is still in this one. Conrad Hussey is unsigned. I don't think he's going to sign today based on what we've heard, but it's a crazy situation because this one was all but written off at this point, and just wasn't ready to get it done. And that's what happens when you take these last-minute official visits. You've got plenty of time to think about it. He was committed since April. So this is a situation where 8 months in the class, and then in the final 2 weekends of the cycle, he goes to Florida State and Miami. That is a recipe for disaster, essentially, when you're making a decision. It's going to second guess what you've done in the first place. It's going to make you second guess a lot of things. So Penn State's still fighting the good fight, trying to get Conrad Hussey. They want Conrad Hussey in their class. There's a reason he's been on the commit list for 8 months. Would I call him committed right now? It doesn't really matter because there's going to be some finality to this situation unless he decides to take it to February, which I doubt he does. So he's got a couple of days to sign. This window is open through Friday, I believe. And that's pretty much where we leave it with that. Like I said, I was texting people all the way up into the show, and they're still working on it. They're still trying to make it happen. And I think Penn State very much in this, and that's something that can change from minute to minute. But as far as where I'm going with this minute, I think Penn State's still alive.
This is the conversation we've had a couple of different times, a couple of different places, Ryan, when we talk about recruiting guys out of your footprint, is that there is more of this stuff that happens. Not that guys in state or in region don't take other visits, but Dakari Nelson checked out a couple of other places, and Conrad Hussey obviously did as well. So, what is your read on this? And then James Franklin saying we need to go to more places to get players and expand our footprint even further is, I think, what he was insinuating, going to a more national scale in the future.
Well, I mean, let's say it what it is. I mean, South Florida is the wild, wild west for recruiting. Okay, I mean, there's a reason that there is so much talent there, and there's so many schools there. And then when you also add in the fact that the southern schools, I mean, let's be real here. The southern schools are just playing on a different game right now when it comes to NIL compared to what the northern schools are doing. So I don't know if that's what's happening to Conrad. I will say this, Conrad. So I've had limited conversations with Conrad. Conrad's probably one of 2, 3, 4 kids in this class that I wouldn't say I know like the rest of them. But from my conversations with him and from my conversations with other people, and Sean, I think you would agree, he does fit Penn State. I mean, he cares a lot. This isn't about, I don't think this is just about money or any of those kind of things. I mean, King Mac, for example, I mean, how many times do they rave today about how King Mac fits this culture? I mean, Conrad does too, because that's a question I asked a lot when I was really kind of surprised that he committed in the first place. So I would be lying if I said I had a great read on Conrad. I know our Florida State guys have thought or been pretty confident. I mean, Sean, 10-11 today? We pretty much thought he was a done deal.
We wrote it off. Yeah, I mean, like we said, there are probably letter of intents signed for Florida State somewhere that just have not been sent, and that's crazy when you think about it. But if he needs to take the time, he's going to take the time. So yeah, we wrote this one off. We thought Penn State was out of it. Miami thought that they were out of it as well, but apparently he was not ready to make that final decision. As we said, you mentioned Kevion Keys a little bit ago. It's hard to make that final decision sometimes because you're going to second guess yourself, and it's easy to second guess yourself when you're 1,000 miles away or going to school 1,000 miles away, and it's 80 degrees one spot and 20 degrees in another. So I don't know how this one's going to turn out, but Penn State certainly sort of rose from the ashes here. You thought it was over, and then all of a sudden they're right back in it. And I mean, the kid likes Penn State. I mean, there's no question about the fact that he likes Penn State and has done it for a while. Has been up a couple of times, has meshed well with some of the other guys in the group. But he's done I mean, I think he's probably, you get to this point where you start overthinking it, and that's, I'm not in his head, so I can't say this, but I've seen this, dozens of times where guys get to the end. They want to take that extra official visit. They want to experience this, and then it just scrambles their brain, and they don't really know what they're, they're not thinking as clearly as they were a couple of weeks prior. So we'll see what happens. I mean, he's got a good head on his shoulders, so we'll see what happens. It's not like he's doing this for attention. It's not like he's doing this for, a reason to draw things out. I think he'd like to have a decision done, but you can second guess yourself all you want.
Shameless plug. You can hear a couple of prospects talking about those things. Dakari Nelson spoke with us on Friday on the BWI Daily Edition about one of the reasons he decided to take some of those visits down the stretch here in the fall. And then Andrew Rappelier spoke with Sean here today, talking about, the perception of decommitting from a program and how that is something that, a guy who wants to give his word and stick to his word, that can be a tough thing to do. I know that came up with Kevion Keys during James Franklin's press conference as well. So you can check out part 1 and 2 of Andrew Rappelier here on our YouTube channel. And Paul, I didn't ignore you. I know that you had this in first thing. I just wanted to make sure that we got to Paul because he gave us $10 here on the channel. Thank you so much for all the donations. See Paul King giving us a donation as well to the channel. If you want to get your question on air or you're feeling generous in the holiday season, you can always leave us a donation. But we're talking to you tonight on the Daily. Michael McCullen puts up a super chat here late to the game. RAP Franco Harris. Exciting day otherwise. Raise a glass to Franco Harris. I didn't get my beer.
I did
before
not
we
expect
started.
that this morning. That's unfortunate, especially with the ceremony coming up, retiring his number and everything. Man, that's terrible. I'm not a Pittsburgh fan, but man, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's certainly a sad day for Penn State, for Pennsylvania, for Penn State, for the Steelers, and for football in general. Franco Harris was an icon in football, and there have been a lot of wonderful tributes to Franco throughout the day on various platforms, and I'm glad Michael brought it up that we could talk about it here for a moment. Getting back to recruiting, though, getting your questions here. How quickly will the offensive line in this class be ready to play? This is a place I want to start with this class. Alex Birchmeier and Javen Williams. We talked about them off the bat. High-level recruits on the offensive line. James Franklin said where they're going to start and what they could be in their future. Fitz, this is something you and I talked about the other day. Do you think that this group of guys can contribute early?
I never want to count on true freshman offensive linemen. I'll say that first. Number two, Penn State's in a position where they don't need one of these guys to really step in right away and just go from the jump. That said, Birchmeier is technically sound. He's big. He's getting there where he needs to be in terms of weight. It's funny because he's under 285 pounds, so he can wrestle, which is great because he's wrestling, leverage, all that kind of thing, or all that kind of stuff. But he's got the technical aspect of it, and I think he can play several different positions. I know Ryan's kind of been out in front of that, potentially talking about him being an offensive tackle, which if you look at the depth chart, that's the place to make a dent because on the interior, you're feeling pretty good about the 2 deep that you have on that interior. So I think, he's the guy that I look to. I know Javen is rated just a bit higher, but I think Birch is closer to where he needs to be to actually play. But like I said, Penn State's offensive line, things stay together the way that they look right now. don't need freshmen, and that's a great spot to be in. That's a testament to the development that they've had on campus, and it's also doesn't hurt that your potential All-American left tackle is going to come back for one more year when you thought maybe he might be up in the air. So I think that's what I'm thinking. Donka is a guy that I think is going to take a little bit of time. Great feet, athleticism, things like that. Interesting when Ryan asked this question today about where these guys fit in terms of position. James basically said all 5 spots, but he said Donka's a guard, likely going to stay a guard. So that's an interesting kind of flip there. But hey, you want all the tackles you can get, the cross training and everything like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan because this is Ryan's question today, and I know he knows these guys as well as anybody.
Yeah, Ryan, I wanted to ask you, this is the video you're watching here on YouTube. You went and saw him live. He played tackle. What are your thoughts, and what do you think about the situation at tackle with him and Javen Williams?
Yeah, great feet, good athleticism. Just has to refine things, when it comes to Anthony Donko. I mean, that's the big thing I would say there. And look, Anthony Donko's offense is very run heavy. It's very similar to Javen Williams. We know for both of those guys, or Penn State knows, what they're getting, as far as run blockers from those guys. They can pull really well, get upfield, bounce off of blocks, get to a second level. I mean, they've proven that over and over again, which is very encouraging, and which is why it makes sense for Donko to start there, because I think that's really just kind of where he's going to end up overall. I mean, they want to put Birch and Javen out there in the spring, as James said today, to test them. Whether that ends up being where they play long-term or not, we'll see. I've said for the longest time, like, if Birch Meyer is going to be an NFL guy, and I don't know if Sean agrees with it or not, I think center is where he would be a great NFL guy. But he's also a great athlete, and he's the most ready to contribute. And while, yes, they're bringing back Ulu, I've heard positive things about Caden. We'll see with Effner, and of course Shelton's there. That tackle situation is still where you put them. I mean, just look at the interior. They're in a good spot there. They lose juice, but I think they'll lose juice. But other than that, they should be in a good spot. So we'll see with those guys. I mean, the only other question I have really is just Javen as a pass protector. That's the one thing we don't know.
Right.
We don't know how he will adapt, whether it's guard or tackle, just because why missing really doesn't do that too much. But everything else for Javen is right there. He deserves that 5-star rating from an athletic perspective, physically. I mean, there's so many reasons he earned that rating. We just have to learn how he is as a pass protector. But these are 3 excellent offensive linemen. This is the best. I went back and looked at it the other night. I mean, there's really, I think there's only one other class, and I apologize, I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head, that kind of stacked up as far as 4-star talent, guys that would rival these. I mean, when you look at, they're all rated as interior guys. What was it? Javen's 1, Birch's 3, and then Donko's 20. If you add the tackles in there, I'm sure Donko's probably in the 30s, and Birch's, I believe top 10, and of course Javen is, I think top 3 if you add in the tackles and that. But my point there is they signed 3 of the top 35-ish offensive linemen this year, and if you go back through their classes using at least on 3's ratings, I don't think you're going to find anything that matches up to it. So Phil Troutwine deserves a ton of credit. I also want to make sure Jaywan Snyder gets a lot of credit on this as well, just because Jaywan does a lot of that Northern Virginia area. Of course, Birchmeyer and Donko, I don't want to say they're neighbors, but they live within, I think 10, 15, 20 miles of each other or so. So Jaywan had a big hand on that. And of course, Troutwine crushed it this year. Of course, and Troutwine was the lead recruiter for Javen all the way. So he deserves a lot of credit there.
Another thing I want to bring up that James Franklin mentioned today, and that I noticed getting my first run through the recruiting cycle, is these guys were up here all the time at prospect camps. And Ryan, what sort of advantage is that? And how much did you observe from these guys watching them throughout this progress? Because one of the things, I saw from Shelton last year, it sounds a lot like Javen Williams. Run heavy offense, doesn't pass protect a whole lot, didn't look great in the All-Star games, and then suddenly thrown into a game in the middle of November, looked pretty good pass protecting. So what do you think the curve is there? I don't want to compare 1-to-1, but like, what has been the growth curve of these guys, and how much has that exposure helped them?
The one thing I would say with camp is when we go to these camps, right, you watch quarterbacks throw, you watch receivers catch, you can only glean so much from offensive linemen, right? You can watch them hit pads, and we do these O-line, D-line drills all the time, but it's O-line are always at a disadvantage in those drills. Let's call it for what it is. So I don't want to put too much stock into those. I would say this. I mean, they wanted Javen to come up because they saw so much potential in Javen, and they want to just keep refining those things. And all the credit to Javen and his family. I mean, they came up multiple times, and then also Donko and Birch, as I said, they live very close to each other, so they came up regularly together. So where that gets them on the field, as far as in a year, in 2 years. In an ideal world, they probably don't touch the field too much this year because they already have their starters coming back. But I truly believe that one of those, Javen or Birch, I would still lean Javen, will probably get more of a push to tackle. They're both going to start there this spring. I think Javen will certainly be the one that they want to contribute there more, but we have to see how he is as a pass protector before we really know anything. I still think Birch, man, as a center, long-term potential would be excellent. He's a great leader. He can read the field. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why he would work, and then Donko is just a mauler.
Yeah, he's a big dude. I think the first time I saw him, I'm like, that dude's a unit. And shout out to Cooper Cousins, friend of the show, who we know is a fan of the show, also up here a lot this summer working with the Penn State staff. Michael McCollum back, he says, nice sag, 3 linebackers. Can't believe Carter is guaranteed beyond next season. So linebacker looking great. That's the next place I want to go in this class with 3 linebackers. James Franklin said, I don't really like to pin these guys into positions because we recruit 3 outside linebackers, and then he did do that. He did give us the roadmap of what he thinks right now. Fitz, what did you think of this particular group and the way they came together?
I mean, it's pretty unbelievable when you take a look at very rarely do they go from 3 top target, and you could say 3 of their top 5 targets from start to finish, and they end up signing 3 of them. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. Tamir Robinson's been on the radar for some time, even before he blew up. Penn State was one of the first schools on him. Rojas is a guy they got to camp very early, ran a 4.47, I think it was, when he was at camp. One of those guys that fits the profile of, sometimes these guys come in as wide receivers. They very early in their career, everybody wants to play wide receiver. I mean, you want the ball in your hand, but then eventually you transition and somebody says, hey, you're probably better off on the defensive side of the ball. Probably can't catch, but you're probably better off on the defensive side of the ball, where you can use that athleticism to be this special kind of defender. So right now you're looking, at Tamir Robinson, who is probably a Mike. You don't know how he's going to bounce back from that knee injury. They think he's going to be fine. It's just a matter of he hasn't played in over a year, so there's not much to go off of from that. He'll be here in a couple of weeks as a January enrollee, hopefully fully healthy and fully ready to go. But just he's clearly got a different body type than those other 2. Those other 2 are 6'3"-ish, 195 pounds-ish, kind of similar size to Dakari Nelson, but they just kind of have different frames, different makeup, where you see these 2 ending up at linebacker. Probably in a perfect world, both of those guys are Sams, but the way that Penn State has played it, sometimes that Sam gets closer to that Will than we want to admit. So you could be a Sam or a Will, and we've been saying for so many years it's either Will or Mike because those are the 2 box linebackers, but keep those guys on the outside and then eventually transition them inside if you need to. And I think that's what they're going to do with all 3, is get them, start Tamir Robinson at the Will, start those other 2 at the Sam, give them a chance to play around in space, see if they can handle the space. Not everybody can handle the space, and then figure out what you want to do with them from there on. Keys and Rojas both have to put some weight on. Like I said, 195 pounds. That's not going to really work in the Big Ten, but I think they'll get there. I don't have a problem with the sizes that they are right now.
One of the things I guess that surprised me was the order in which he put them, with Kavion Keys being the box guy and Tony Rojas being a Sam in where they start from. But when you watch Tony Rojas run, and I apologize, the reason that I don't have a beverage like my cohorts is that I was trying to get as much video available as possible for the show, and I didn't get Tony up here on the channel. But Ryan, you went and watched him live. Convinced me this dude isn't a 4-star, 5-star running back. And what does that speed mean at linebacker for Penn State?
Well, I mean, look, what did James Franklin say today? Tony is pretty much physically exactly what they want. And I know that's not answering your speed question there, but from a build perspective, I mean, that's exactly what they want. They want to be able to stack pounds on them, add those 15 pounds, 20 pounds, 25, eventually get you to 215 or so, and keep that speed on them. But Tony Rojas was, without a doubt, the most impressive player I saw live this year. So the one thing I will say, though, is from a linebacker's perspective, he didn't really play linebacker. He played defensive end in those games. So really watching him read the guards, get outside, pass coverage, there was only so much you can really take from it. Fairfax made it really simple. Tony, go get the quarterback. And he did. I think he had 4 or 5 sacks in that game. It was I think it was 4 sacks, 8 tackles, 5 tackles for loss. It was a very, very impressive game. And then he rushed for, over 200 plus yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns. It was excellent. But those are the questions we have to learn about Tony. We know he's an excellent athlete, but how can he read guards, and in pass coverage? Because he really hasn't played a lot of linebacker. But from a physical perspective, he's excellent. I would lean a little bit more towards Kavion as being the one who I could maybe see getting on the field a little bit sooner, just from I think he has a little bit more of a experience at the position. But both those guys are excellent. And of course, as long as Tamir, which I asked Terry Smith today, is he 100%? Is he ready to go? And Terry said yes. I'll be anxious to see how Tamir does this spring, which James said Tamir is going to start the mic, which is always kind of what we expected there. But it was good to get clarification from the head coach.
And it's linebacker, not edge defender. Trying to convince people that no, they're going to start these guys at linebacker has been one of the most fun things I've had these conversations with plenty of people. Like, oh yeah, definitely, he's an edge defender, right? And then you have to have that conversation. The tight end group. Speaking of, what position do you play? Let's get right to Mega Barnwell, because Ryan, I want to come back to you. Mm-hmm. You and I had a conversation after the press conference. What was James Franklin saying when he talked about Mega Barnwell and what position he's going to play at Penn State and the long-term view of what he might be?
I'm trying to pull up James's quote real quick, because I think James pretty much said it all here when asked about Matthias today. He says, we think he can play tight end for sure. And then I also think there's a chance that he could play on the offensive line. Now, most high school kids don't want to hear that they're being projected to move to the offensive line until you show them how many first-round draft choices on the offensive line started at tight end. That's usually a pretty good story to tell. But at the end of the day, we want guys to play the position they want to play. A lot of times, guys will kind of see that on their own that they need to move. I mean, I think James really kind of laid it out there. Matthias wants to play tight end. Penn State's going to give him the opportunity to play tight end. Give Matthias credit. There was a point almost a little over a year ago where he was like 265, pushing 270. I mean, everything was looking like Matthias was going to be 280, 290 by now and a surefire offensive tackle. And he said, hey, I really want to play tight end. I'm going to keep the weight off. And he's done that. He's at 240, I think 245 right now, I believe is what it is, 6'6", 245.
You can see it, by the way. You can see it on film how he dropped weight, and it was a bit of a shock to me watching it throughout the year.
You don't even need the film; just look at a picture. I mean, he's completely night and day. I mean, it. I don't want to say it got away from him, but he put some weight on fast, and then was able to take it off. And he's a trim 245. So good for him. But no, I agree with Ryan. I think they want him to be an offensive tackle in the worst way, because that's a position you just can't find those guys, and you just can't, you can't manufacture everyone to be an offensive tackle. That's an intriguing frame. It's been that way since he was, a ninth grader when they offered him. It's like, what is this guy going to be? Because you don't know that he's going to stick at tight end. And tight end, I mean, let's be honest, you can play a couple tight ends at the same time, but it's a lot harder to get on the field as a fifth tight end. So, I mean, where is this going to go? All depends on nature. All depends on that nutrition program. All depends on the strength program. They're going to have some fun with him, because there's a lot to work with there. And I'm curious to see which avenue he ends up taking. But if it's me, I look at what James Franklin said today. I thought he was going to say, hey, look at all the money that offensive tackles make in the NFL. That's a big difference than tight ends.
Yeah, first off, that exactly the difference between the two positions. Let me just read you a couple numbers: 23, 23, 22, 19, and 18. That is the top 5 salary in millions of dollars averaged by the year for tackles in the NFL. So there is no shame in embracing your genetics and being very good at playing tackle. Fitz, this is the question. Either 3 technique or left tackle. And I know we focused on the offensive side, but he was a very good defensive tackle in high school. Is he the wild card of this class that can give Penn State one of the things it's looking for that we aren't going to be talking about today? Are those big guys on the line of scrimmage that have that length and that sort of difference-making size?
Well, you look at his tape and you wonder, is he physical enough to hold up in the middle? And that's a big question when you're playing that sort of split out tight end that he is. You have questions about whether that'll happen. I'm not saying you don't have to be physical as an offensive tackle, because you do, but it's a different kind of physicality than when you've got, a guard and a center, just barreling down on you, doubling down and trying to put you on your back. So that's the only question. And it's not a question of, do I think he can do it or not? It's just you haven't really seen it in the tape. So curious to see where he's at from a physical perspective, because they'd even talked about defensive end. And granted, the run that they went on late with Mason Robinson or with Joseph McBoy, you don't necessarily need another defensive end, but defensive tackle, again, when you're looking at this class and where you would like to add numbers, you sort of go to that place with Mega Barnwell and say, how can he help you the most? And offensive tackle and defensive tackle are the two that you just kind of gravitate to with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ryan, tell me about Joey Schlaffer, and we'll save the conversation about Andrew Rappleyea for Fitz's conversation with him here on the channel. If you want to check out those and kind of get the word from the player himself, you can check out just a whole bunch of stuff on Andrew Rappleyea here on the channel. But close us out here with the tight ends on Joey Schlaffer and your thoughts on what he can be and what your view of him has been throughout this process.
Yeah, just a playmaker. And it's funny, I've seen Joey probably play more than anyone in this class. Of course, he's from Exeter in Reading, so it's pretty easy to get there. I always wondered why Exeter didn't kind of use him more. I mean, he got 3, 4, 5 touches a game, and he was excellent in those high point, fade end zones, which how many times have we seen those fades over the years to the KJ Hamlers and the Jahan Dotsons of the world? I mean, he would fit that really well. Now, of course, they have to split him out wide to do those kind of things. And we'll see if that happens. But he's an excellent playmaker. I think he averaged 23 yards a catch this year. And then, by the way, he had, I believe it was 33 catches and 10 touchdowns, I want to say, somewhere in that ballpark. And that may have not included 1 or 2 playoff games. I think that was maybe missing his last playoff game or so. But my point is, he scored a touchdown every third play, averaging 20-plus yards a catch. I mean, the guy makes plays. What I'll just be interested to see is, especially when you have Rappleyea, is how do they use him, right? I mean, more of an H-back kind of guy. I certainly see them standing him up more, and letting him run those shorter, intermediate kind of routes. I think that makes the most sense. But, I mean, Joey's an absolute playmaker and somebody that I don't think he would get it on the field right away just because of how deep that tight end room is. I mean, I think Penn State fans know all about Theo. Of course, we'll see what Brenton does, Tyler as well. And then I think from talking to people, I think Jerry Cross is really impressed after coming back from an injury. Jerry Cross really impressed recently, and Khalil always is kind of, I feel like, always been overlooked a bit. But my point is there's a lot of talent there. It's not going to be easy for either of these guys to get on the field. But if I had to lean towards one guy to get on the field from a physical perspective, I would still lean towards Rappleyea a little bit. But give Joey a year to put on some weight, get used to college ball, and I could certainly see him making plays in 2024 or 2025.
So it's not all sunshine and roses. That's not how this works. Even with the top classes, you miss on some players. So these are the places that Penn State is looking in the transfer portal or in the second signing period, according to James Franklin today. Wide receiver, offensive tackle, defensive tackle. We've touched on a couple of that a little bit. Safety, depending on what happens with Conrad Hussey. And defensive end. That one I didn't have on the radar after some of the guys that signed here. Fitz, what's the situation with, I guess, what are the biggest misses, in your opinion, of guys that, I don't want to say should have, but they could have gotten that were strong possibilities that ultimately landed somewhere else, and how do they recover from those things?
Oh, I mean, you can second guess this class, at a dozen spots, because there's so many guys that come through with offers and things like that. Receiver is going to be the one you keep going back to because you took up space in your class for so long with Hijani Shakir before deciding that you wanted to go in another direction. That kind of kills you right there is you lose that opportunity to take another guy there. Of course, you go to the end with Edwin Joseph. They're in a spot where they, I think, have second guessed themselves out of some guys. I mentioned Edwin Joseph. You're wondering if those guys are fast enough, and at this point, you're wondering if like a 4.5 guy is fast enough, which is kind of crazy when you think about how fast an actual 4.5 guy is. Where most of these guys are not 4.4, 4.3 like they say. But receiver is, I think, the one that you just keep going back to, because I don't know that there was a guy, that outside of Rodney Gallagher early that you look to as a surefire top target that they quote unquote missed on. But there's certainly plenty of guys that wide receivers dime a dozen position right there. I mean, I was trying to find a nice way to say that, but there's a lot of receivers out there that provide the same skill set, and that's why I think the hit rate at that position is not as high, because you've got a lot of similar players, and that's why you find yourself looking for receivers in the portal that actually were able to get there and develop. And not talking about the portal right now, but offensive tackle. This group is probably not so much the offensive tackle group, but this offensive line group. Josh Miller decommitted, and I think people just kind of wrote it off. Josh Miller is a really good player, and I think I would not be surprised if he ended up as starter at Georgia. When you lose a number like that, when you're shooting for 5 and you have 4, and people forget that they had 4 offensive linemen committed for the longest time, it's tough to backtrack on that and find your way out of there. So as far as like guys that they missed on, you're going to have misses, but those positions make a lot of sense. Receivers still going out in the portal. Offensive tackle is going to be very hard to get in the portal. Keyshawn Blackstock, the JUCO kid, signed with Michigan State. Ajani Cornelius, the transfer from Rhode Island, ended up at Oregon. Would those guys have started next year? Probably not. But You're still looking for all the bodies that you can get at that offensive tackle position.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those situations where receiver, there's 1,000 in the portal, but you're not looking for just any receiver. You're not looking for just any receiver in recruiting. You got to find the right fit from not just a personality standpoint, but from a need of what are the skills you need in the class. Ryan, you had something?
Yeah, I just want to chime in on this one a little bit. A couple guys that they have missed on that I think obviously I thought they were going to get at least 1 point. First off, I'm shocked we went 48 minutes and did not mention Daniel Harris yet after the last couple of weeks and what that's been like. That's one that I think the staff, there's nothing that staff could have done. It is what it is there. I think Daniel Harris wanted to be at Georgia. There were some reasons to decommit, whether mom, dad, whatever, whether they're on the same page or not, I don't even know exactly. But Penn State pretty much had them. What, last Friday, Sean? When we were here,
last Friday,
Penn State, right?
Yep.
And I don't know whatever happened over the weekend, but something happened there. It is what it is. But 2 guys that I really think that, man, Penn State really wanted, and I thought they were going to get: Jason Moore, DeMatha, Evan Link, Gonzaga, both WCAC guys down there in the DC area. Look, Jason Moore coming off that official visit, another guy where everybody was feeling really good about this one. He goes to Ohio State. Larry Johnson. I think Penn State fans, I don't want to say gotten used to it, but Ohio State's Ohio State, guys. Larry Johnson is Larry Johnson.
You do get it.
I think they get that.
Yeah, a high 4-star or 5-star guy goes to Ohio State. That is a pipeline directly to the top 5 in the NFL for the right player.
Right. So, that's just one that they certainly missed on. And then Penn State worked on Jason Moore. I don't think we talked about it enough, Sean, about July, August, September. Penn State was working on Jason Moore more than I think we talked about publicly. They never were able to get him the visit. I wasn't really going to talk about a lot unless he was going to seriously maybe consider coming to one of the games this year, and that just never happened. So that's why I don't think we talked about it a lot. But there was communication with Jason Moore, I think more than we discussed it. And then just with Evan Link, we knew it was all about academics, and it was funny because he never got to take the official visit to Michigan, or at least at the time in the summer, because he was sick, and he actually genuinely was sick. And his schools were Penn State, which was a good academic school, better football program, Stanford, okay football program, elite academics. Well, what's in the middle? Michigan. And once he was able to take did he take an unofficial visit? I'm trying to remember. Did he take an unofficial visit in July?
I think he got out there at the end of July.
Yeah.
But I wasn't working, so I wasn't really following it the other day like you.
Boom. And yeah, July 30th, he was out there. So it just, once he was able to take an unofficial visit there, I mean, look, whether Penn State fans want to admit it or not, Michigan is a great academic school. It is a little bit higher than Penn State. Penn State's a good academic school too, guys, but Michigan is a little higher on that spectrum. His brother goes to Harvard. I don't know if people know that, but like academics are seriously very incredibly important
Legit,
with that family. Yeah. So it made sense in the end, but that was another one where Penn State thought they pretty much had him, and he ends up getting away there. So I think Evan Link hurt a little bit more than Jason Moore from the perspective of, I think Evan Link was all signs reporting towards Penn State, and then it slipped away.
A couple more things I want to get to here. We got a couple more minutes on the show. Something James Franklin talked about in his opening statement. We got big guys. We got little guys. Let's talk about some of the little guys. You mentioned Carmelo Taylor. Good frame, but 155 according to our measure from it on 3.
That's correct.
Cam Wallace, 175 pounds. London Montgomery, I think we had him 175 as well. Is the lack of size at the skill position, is that a concern for either of you in this class? Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you look at these guys, and I think more for an early impact, from an early impact stance than an actual development stance, because Penn State has had guys that come in small and they make the most of it. I will say, with how things have set up at running back, that's certainly big questions there. London Montgomery, you don't know what he's going to be like coming off of the knee injury and subsequent surgery. Cam Wallace, I mean, he's a lot smaller than we gave him credit for. I think we had him at 6 foot 185 or something coming into the visit, 5'10", 170, something like that coming out of it. So it's amazing how that. Well, he came up north. He got cold, shrink, Seinfeld jokes and such. And then Taylor is 155 pounds, which he can scoot. I mean, he can run really well, but 155 pounds, it's tough to go out. So yeah, I think the lack of size there is an issue. Like I said, for more immediate. I will say this with Cameron Wallace, and this is the thing they loved about Cam Wallace. When you put on that tape, very good running back tape. Obviously, he's a Division I running back, but you see his defensive tape. He's not afraid to get in there. He hits, and that's really what put him over the top with the staff, was they loved his defensive tape. Not that they were going to take him on defense, but when you can play football on both sides of the ball and have that level of instinctual football awareness, it says something. And I think that positional flexibility is probably the wrong word for this, but your ability to play the all-around game is something that Cam Wallace really brings to the table that I think people are probably overlooking. He's got speed, he's got quickness and things like that for a back. But throw him back there at safety, throw him at corner, he'll come up and hit you. And that's absolutely what you would need from a high school running back prospect.
A lot of guys in this class are fun because they do that, where King Mack is undersized, he'll fly around and hit you. And both of these guys, I think London Montgomery doesn't get enough credit as well for having great contact balance, and we just didn't see him play his senior year. Cameron Wallace, film room coming up tomorrow. Ryan, I want to come back to you with this. James Franklin, during the live stream, made it seem like Wallace, they're counting on him. I know that the numbers, they're in flux possibly, but is it more than just that? Because he does bring that big-time speed. Do you see a role for him in the offense, or is it purely the potential he might be the third back when all the dust settles?
Yeah, it depends on Kavion. I mean, that's a big thing that I think Kavion's coming back. I mean, just from the signs we've. Oh, that's a Kavion.
Yeah,
I think I had one too many. Sorry, guys.
It's a long day.
Kevon Lee. Kevon. Yeah, so I mean, it's going to depend on that. I think he's coming back, but I mean, obviously they're totally two different backs. I'm just saying. I mean, look, can you give 4 or 5 backs the ball? I don't know if that's really too realistic outside of. Maybe some of those early season games. But, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can use him, of course, as a speed guy. But Nick Singleton is incredible. So do I expect Cam Wallace to come in next year and get, 5-10 touches a game? No, I don't really see that. I still think look, I mean, he's an incredible player. But I do think it's important to remember that he's playing in 1A down in Georgia. And now, look, 1A in Georgia, guys, is 4A up here. I mean, McDevitt's 4A up here. I mean, I think that's probably a similar level considering how incredible Georgia high school football is. I mean, it is, if there's any state that's on the rise more than Georgia, I'd love to see it. So that's important to note, though. I do think that's, it's not, he's not playing at some of those massive Atlanta powers. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure he has the speed. There's ways. I mean, maybe special teams. I'm not exactly sure. I think there's others that probably make a little bit more sense. I think actually Carmelo Taylor probably makes a little bit more sense from that perspective. But there's a lot to like here. I mean, get him on the field. Let's see how it plays out. If he was maybe even enrolling early too, I could see it a little bit more. But I still think this is the Nick Singleton show. And then, of course, Katron will have a big impact as well.
So moving on quickly, because there are a couple more things I want to touch on. Quick guy we haven't talked about at all, the quarterback. We usually start with the quarterback, Jackson Smolik. What are your thoughts on him? I'm going to come back to you on this one, Ryan, because you went out to see him. James Franco calls him the steal of the class. What did you see when you saw him in person, and what was your impression of him talking to him?
We go through this all the time, right? Jackson was averaging like incredible stats his first couple games. I forget what it was. It's, almost 300 yards passing, couple touchdowns a game. And then the game I go to, they ran the ball 40 plus times. So the game I went to, unfortunately, wasn't the best of examples of what it could have potentially have been. But I just see a smart player. And then that's really, I think, what Jackson, when we have talked over the last couple of days, that's something he's consistently hit on, is he feels like that's his biggest strength, is just reading the field, making smart plays, not making dumb plays. I mean, I think he only had 4 interceptions, I want to say, this year I believe it wasn't quite 200 pass attempts, but it was a pretty good number there. So smart player. Look, Drew Aller, I mean, this is his team next year, and let's see how things play out. But of course, Bo Pribula too is an excellent player, but Jackson Smolik earn this opportunity. And Jackson Smolik is a better athlete than I think all of us realized when he came to camp. Sean, was it a 4.8 40? I think that's what
I think it was a little quicker than that, to be honest with you.
Better. Okay.
I saw some numbers, and he surprised me with his numbers because they were I was comparing them to some of the other quarterbacks that they had in, and they were significantly better than a lot of those numbers. So I was surprised by that, but certainly pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I like Smolik a lot. I mean, this is a big adjustment here, moving up to this level. Although I will say that Iowa high school football was better than I think I even realized the more I looked into it this year. Which, by the way, I looked it up now. 4.69.
6.9. Yeah.
Yeah. And a 4.3 shuttle, guys. Pretty good.
Yeah. Good. So the funny thing is, somebody asked me, what quarterback is he like? I'm like, well, if you mushed Trace McSorley and Sean Clifford together, that's kind of, you squint a little bit, that's what I see on tape. Stone cold killer. He's a great decision maker, but he's a pocket passer first, and I think that athleticism is something that he's still learning to use. Fitz, I don't think we've talked about Smolik together before. What are your thoughts on him?
Like him as an athlete. He's a guy that's more accurate than a power passer, I would say. So it's not. I just don't think he blows you away in any one thing. But he's got the leadership. He's got a lot of things that some of the very productive quarterbacks at Penn State have had. It's just not going to blow you away with his arm or anything like that, which is fine. He'll get stronger, and he's pretty athletic, as Ryan said. He read off a couple numbers for you. I saw him in camp. He's a pretty good quarterback. I mean, I don't think he's at the caliber of what they brought in the prior class, but I think he's a good guy to have there, and I think he's a guy that'll compete. Certainly came in committed to Tulane, competed against a bunch of guys that were vying for that open offer, and there's something to be said for that. So I'm excited to watch him develop. I'm excited to watch him get bigger and stronger. He looks young. He looks like a guy that is going to have a lot of physical development ahead of him. So I'm curious to see how that impacts his arm strength, how that impacts him as a player. So very curious to see what the next couple of years hold for him. It's not an easy situation. I mean, we said that when we were talking about Dante Moore as Penn State's top quarterback target in that cycle. They weren't going to get Dante Moore because of what they signed the year before. So interesting in between year for Penn State, and that's a good pull. If you get a kid of this caliber as after a 2 quarterback class, I say it's a pretty good pull.
Get your questions in here at the very end. We're going to go 5 quick questions. I've got some prepared, but if I see some good ones in the chat, we'll go to those ones. So last call for questions. We are going to talk about Kenny Sanders and Alan Zamitis today. because both of them, giving some love to the behind the scenes people that aren't the coaches, that aren't the people out in the front of the microphone. Both of them got a lot of credit today from the coaching staff, and we got a chance to speak to them as well after James Franklin spoke. So come back to you, Ryan. Your thoughts on their contributions, and you mentioned a couple of them here, but how important are these two guys to the staff?
I mean, there's so many of them. I could rattle off the whole staff right now, but we met with these guys today. So the first thing I'll say is, Sean, you were with me for this one. We got to talk to Kenny today, and I said, Kenny, how many guys do you text today? And I said 50, and he just laughed in my face, which I thought was a good number. But he said he has about 70 2024 guys alone that he needs to communicate with almost daily. I don't know if it's every single one of those guys, but I think it's well over 100. So I just think that kind of gives you perspective, right? I mean, he's in charge of communicating with 70 2024 guys the day before signing day, okay? And then obviously, there's a ton of 2023 things going through and the transfer portal. I mean, there's just so much going on right now. These guys are working, I would say 15-hour days, and they're probably laughing at that if they see this right now.
That's probably well short. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, Kenny Sanders is a pro, man.
Kenny was asleep talking to us. I'm convinced of it. He was just sitting there and he was just
rattling
off these numbers and things like that. And he was Kenny's, that's kind of where you're at with these guys. And Andy was the same way. There's the last couple of weeks, especially the last week going into signing day, because you're always recruiting, you're always doing all this stuff. And on top of that, you have to plan all the signing day stuff, which a lot goes into it. Those guys were quite tired. And, we've all had a long signing day, but those guys have had the longest signing day.
I say all the time how, I feel like people in our industry were always like, oh, we're drinking beers, we worked so hard today, signing day's over, and we don't do anything compared to those guys. So I just laugh at that all the time. I think we work hard, but it's nothing compared to those guys.
Quick, first question here is going to be rapid fire. What are you guys drinking tonight?
Dogfish 60-minute IPA.
Anti-fragile evidence of absence.
You guys.
If I lived in State College, still that would be my pick.
Yeah. I love a good craft beer, so excellent choices all around. Next one comes from Chris. He says, how is Stubbs doing right now? Taylor Stubblefield feels like he's missed on some top wide receivers. What are your thoughts on the receiver position? I know we've been talking a lot about it, but in reference to Stubblefield, how do you feel that situation is?
Sean, I'll throw this to you, but the one thing I would just say real quick is I don't think we have an answer yet, because the portal is where we're going to get this answer, right? I mean, they want guys who are going to come in and play right away. Obviously, they would have liked to have gotten another 2023 wide receiver. But what they need is to surround Drew Aller now, immediately, next year, obviously, is what I'm talking about. So I think it's an incomplete answer right now. They found Carmelo Taylor. Carmelo Taylor has a 10.56 100-meter, guys. I mean, it's an incredible number. Yes, he's 155 pounds, and he needs to add on weight as soon as he gets here, and he will. But Carmelo Taylor is going to end up being a steal. Sure, there were some other guys that they would have liked to got in this class, but again, if they're able to get Cephas, and we still believe they're the favorite there, let's see how things progress in the coming days. That's a great pickup, and then I think if they can get one more from somewhere, that's what they need. They need guys who are going to come in and make an impact against West Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't think it's going to be Caden Prather. I don't think it's going to be Dante Thornton. There's a couple of guys that are on the board, posted some notes yesterday. Devin Carter, NC State, is a guy to look for. Devontae Walker, by the way, committed to North Carolina today. Not surprised at all. They were the leader since he went into the portal. He's a Charlotte guy. Penn State pursued hard, wanted to get him on campus for a visit. Didn't happen. That's the way that it happens in the portal. In terms of Stubblefield, he's not the dynamic recruiter. That's been the thing for him the entire time. He's been a developer. He's been a guy that has, you've looked to take what you have on your roster, make it better. He's done that at times. But there's a bit of a hole right there right now. And is that on his shoulders? Some of it, I think it is. But no, I think we want to find the next hot seat guy. Last year it was Trout. Last year it was Howell. Trout's been there. Everybody's been there. Everybody's looking for the hot seat guy. And I guess we've moved on to Taylor Stubblefield. I will say, T. Frank, I was not prepared for your question earlier about specific guys that they missed. I didn't know if you could. I was trying to do the hamster was going, but it wasn't going anywhere. Cam Selden, I think, is that guy from Virginia. He's a big time target for the staff. Tennessee got him in the summer. And typically when you recruit against Tennessee in the fall, the way that they've done it the last several years is that Tennessee's fallen off, and you've been able to scoop up guys like that, or at least schools have been able to scoop up guys like that. And missing on Cam Seldon, they put a lot of time into Cam Seldon, Snyder, this Poindexter especially. There was talk about him being a big-time safety. There was talk about him being a running back and things like that. But he wanted to be a receiver the entire time, and that's one that I think they missed on because while he comes from a spot or from an area where it's going to be a big jump in competition to the SEC or the Big Ten, physically, I think he's able to do that, and that's where it's going to hurt you. And then on top of that, going back, and we're talking receivers here, losing Lonnie White. I know that was always a threat there, but losing Lonnie White was a big one because he's a phenomenally talented athlete that would have been working his way into the rotation by now.
Yeah, and you got the patented T. Frank curveball that Ryan has gotten used to, where you guys killed it on that particular part of the rundown, and then that just popped in my head, and it just came out. So
that's all right. I got TJ Parker for defense when you ask about that too. So we got that going.
Hey, one thing, real quick. I know we gotta get moving here soon. I can hear my wife upstairs struggling with my children to get them to bed right now. But one thing I would also just say with receivers is just like, who did they, other than Rodney and Cam, like. And obviously Yazid flips. They had Yazid. But, like, who else did they, like, absolutely whiff on? I can't really think of too many. Noah Rogers, Bryson Rogers. They're not whiffs in my mind. I mean, there's some other guys, more local guys that they flirted with for a little while, but I wouldn't really consider them massive whiffs. So I think Cam Seldon, absolutely. That's somebody they really wanted. But it's not like they missed on 5-6 guys this year that we were all picking to end up here.
Last word is going to be from P. Danny, watching from South Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an international show. This has been fantastic, and I do want to apologize, T. Frank and Lash Building Internet Provider on the hot seat. I don't know what's going on with my internet tonight. I apologize. We're going to figure that out. I pay for the highest internet. I have the best equipment to make sure that doesn't happen, and it's been happening lately. So we'll get that sorted out before the next live show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. I've taken up of their time. Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder, thank you both so much for coming on the Daily. We're not going to get any last words because we're out of here. We will talk to you tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition.